On this Christmas morning, as we continue our breaking news coverage of a huge explosion. Nick Barris in the 5 Alert Center. Nick, I understand you have spoken with a witness. What have you learned?
Yeah, Roy, this is getting to the heart of the question of what was it exactly that led law enforcement to believe that this RV on 2nd Avenue was suspicious. What drew them to that location and why? And it's really a critical question being asked right now, and I think we have some answers to that question. I talked about it earlier in one of my live hits, and now we have one of the witnesses, a resident who lives right down there, joining us on the phone right now to talk about what it was she saw. And this, folks, is very interesting. Let me make sure we've got her on the line. Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us. If you would, real quickly, could you please give us an idea of where you live, proximity to this RV, and then we'll get into what happened this morning.
Okay, I live at 166 2nd Avenue North. That's the building where the melting pot is located and Rodizio. And the RV was parked right outside of our window. We're on the 3rd floor, and the RV was directly across the street from our apartment.
Okay, so now let's go to what you told me and what I know authorities are looking into as well. It was around 5 or 5:30 this morning that you were awakened, and walk me through it to the sound of gunshots initially?
Exactly. Between 5 and 5:30 a.m., we heard very loud gunshots, repetitive, like 5 to 6 shots. I'm not sure, but very loud, and that woke us up. But we only heard it for a minute, and we just thought maybe, you don't know. You live downtown, you hear things. We've been living there for 15 years. Well, about 5 minutes later, we heard it again. And then I realized, and it was in the same place right outside of our window, basically on the street. So I called 911 for the first time at 5:32 this morning was my 911 call to say that I had heard gunshots. Well, then I went downstairs. We have a 2-level apartment, and I looked out the shades of my window, which I was a little bit afraid to raise because of the gunshots were so close. And I saw an RV directly out front across the street. And I began to hear a broadcast from, like a recording coming from the RV. And it was saying, this vehicle has a bomb. If you can hear this message, you need to evacuate. And all that was happening, and it was still, that went on for about 30 minutes. But then the RV message changed and said you have 15 minutes to evacuate. And then we heard 14 minutes. Well, I went downstairs and I looked out on the sidewalk, and I saw that police were at both ends. By the way, I did see a police officer earlier between 5:30 and 6 a.m. walk around the RV.
Okay,
and 911 told me that police had responded.
So they had responded, and we'll take it from there then. So what you're saying you heard at some point, and maybe this was something law enforcement had already been alerted to, was some kind of an announcement coming from the RV. I think you mentioned to me, did you not, it sounded recorded, a male voice, but you never saw any individual inside the RV.
No, I couldn't see inside the RV. It was parked facing in an opposite direction, so I never saw the windshield. And, I was listening to something that I think you guys just played on the news, and now I'm not as positive it was a male voice, but it was definitely a recorded voice.
A recorded voice, okay.
Consistent, saying, evacuate this area. This vehicle is a bomb. It has a bomb. And then it started the countdown, and the last count we heard was 8 minutes, and we were in our cars driving across the river. But then it didn't go off until sometime after that.
Okay, so do you think you made it across, you went over to Nissan Stadium, maybe in the parking area there, the countdown?
And watched our building, and we were looking right at our building, and we knew, we couldn't hear the countdown at that point, but we knew from the time that we left, 20 minutes had passed, and there hadn't been an explosion, so we started driving back. We came back across KVD Bridge, and we're going to turn down 2nd Avenue. In fact, we made it almost down, we were on 2nd Avenue. Headed towards Broadway, but not quite to Broadway, and that's when we saw the explosion.
So at that point, you thought, hey, this may have been some type of hoax, and then, boom, It went off.
Yeah, we thought it was over, and then it happened, and then we just pulled over, and of course, by that time, everything was blocked off. And
wow. Do you know, by the way,
we're in a hotel now.
Just to ask you this, do you know, were there other residents in the building, to your knowledge, that got out safely, perhaps, or?
Not in our building is a vacation rental business. We run that. Now, 2 of our family members are here. We have, and we got them out with us. They were in separate apartments, but they came with us. So the only 4 people in our building got out.
Had you not gotten out, do you think you would have been harmed?
Oh, definitely. You all been showing it on here. We're the building straight across from the explosion. The whole front of our building is blown up.
So you might have been killed. You might have been killed if not for that warning.
Yes, if not for the warning, if that person had just detonated that bomb with no warning and no gunshots, we would have been either very seriously injured or killed.
Let me ask you this,
Whoever
too.
did this,
As someone
yeah.
who's familiar, obviously very familiar with 2nd Avenue, the fact that there would have been an RV parked there along that stretch on Christmas morning, not that unto itself, by itself, just sitting there, is not all that unusual, would it be? There were other vehicles parked on the road. That wouldn't have been suspicious by itself, would it?
No, it wouldn't have, and especially because it's the holidays and people know that parking's not being enforced. I would have assumed that was some family visiting somebody, and
Gotcha.
they just parked their RV there.
So
Yeah.
it's your belief then that the early response from law enforcement, and obviously how you were able to get out of there, is because of combination, the gunshots, which really right now we can't really explain what those were all about, and then the warning from the vehicle.
Exactly. Yeah, the gunshots, and I mentioned this before, and I'm not sure of this, but the gunshots were so loud, there is a possibility. We've wondered now if they weren't a recording that came from the vehicle as well.
Interesting.
We don't know that, but as we've reflected back on it, because we heard it 3 times, it was exactly the same. You know, we wonder now if we weren't listening to a recording, but we don't know. But the gunshots definitely is what woke us up. And then, because the recording I don't think would have been loud enough to wake us up if
Right.
we hadn't heard the gunshots.
Of course. By the way, do you have any inkling, and not something you would have necessarily noticed, but how long had the RV been there? Was it there earlier in the day? Do you think it just showed up overnight? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was not. I went out yesterday morning. I went to do a little last-minute shopping, and I don't remember seeing it then. I feel like I might have noticed because the street was pretty dead. You know, I mean, there were a few workman-type cars there, but I didn't notice it, no. But so I don't know.
And you would, and by the
I
way,
didn't take a picture of it or anything.
Sure. Why would you? Of course. And can you give me though, kind of a description of it? An older RV, a new one? Is this one of
Yeah,
those where there was a camper attached to a pickup, or how would you describe
No,
it?
it was a single vehicle. It was definitely one vehicle.
Okay.
You know, like a bigger kind of RV. It wasn't all beat up looking, but it wasn't new. You know, it wasn't one of those slick-sided ones. It was more of an older one, but it was large. I mean, it was a large RV, and it was an older one.
Now, do you have any idea when you'll be allowed back into the area? And for now, I assume you're elsewhere.
Yeah, we're at a hotel now. Honestly, it's very difficult to tell. I don't know which building for sure is ours that you're all showing on the film, but I know all of our front windows are blown out, our apartment's blown out. I can't imagine that we'll be back in for days, and we didn't come out with anything but the clothes on our backs and pajamas.
And again, since you're very familiar with that area, we know there are restaurants and clubs there. Can you think of anything there in your mind, and I'm just asking you as a citizen who lives in that area, that would have been a potential target?
No, I can't. I mean, our thought was they must be after the AT&T building. That was our thought, just because, you know, that's where they were parked on that side of the street. They chose not, thank God, to go down to Broadway and destroy everything. So, I mean, our thought was they must have been aiming for the building that they parked close to.
Gotcha. Well, that's certainly something I know law enforcement will be going to look at, and that's just speculation right now. But listen, ma'am, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so glad you were safe, and hopefully what you've shared here, along with authorities, will help in the investigation of this case. But thank you, ma'am, so much for your time.